The questions posed by the General Assembly represent more than a legal problem. They concern an existential problem of planetary proportions that imperils all forms of life and the very health of our planet. A complete solution to this daunting and self-inflicted problem requires the contribution of all fields of human knowledge. Above all, a lasting and satisfactory solution requires human will and wisdom at the individual, social, and political levels to change our habits, comforts, and current way of life in order to secure a future for ourselves and those who are yet to come. The environment is the foundation for human life, upon which the health and well-being of both present and future generations depend. The Court is also of the view that the adverse effects of climate change may significantly impair the effective enjoyment of such human rights as the right to health, the right to an adequate standard of living, which for its part encompasses access to food, water, and housing, the right to privacy, and the rights of women, children, and indigenous peoples. In order to guarantee the effective enjoyment of human rights, states must take measures to protect the climate system and other parts of the environment. Under international human rights law, states are required to take necessary measures. The Court considers the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold to be the parties' agreed primary temperature goal for limiting the global average temperature increase under the Paris Agreement. A party's NDCs must reflect its highest possible ambition. Because of the seriousness of the threat posed by climate change, the standard of due diligence to be applied in preparing NDCs is stringent. This means that each party has to do its utmost to ensure that the NDCs it puts forward represent its highest possible ambition in order to realize the objectives of the agreement. The standard to be applied when assessing the NDCs of different parties will vary depending inter alia on historical contributions to cumulative GHG emissions and the level of development and national circumstances of the party in question. In relation to private actors, the Court observes that the obligations it has identified include the obligation of states to regulate the activities of private actors as a matter of due diligence. Thus, a state may be responsible where, for example, it has failed to exercise due diligence by not taking the necessary regulatory and legislative measures to limit the quantity of emissions caused by private actors under its jurisdiction. Failure of a state to take appropriate action to protect the climate system from GHG emissions, including through fossil fuel production, fossil fuel consumption, the granting of fossil fuel exploration licenses, or the provision of fossil fuel subsidies, may constitute an internationally wrongful act which is attributable to that state. The breach by a state of any obligations identified in response to question A constitute an internationally wrongful act entailing the responsibility of that state. The responsible state is under a continuing duty to perform the obligation breached. The legal consequences resulting from the commission of an internationally wrongful act may include the obligations of A, cessation of the wrongful actions or omissions if they are continuing, B, providing assurances and guarantees of non-repetition of wrongful actions or omissions if circumstances so require, and C, full reparation to injured states in the form of restitution, compensation, and satisfaction with respect to sea level rise and its implications. The court notes that several participants argued that sea level rise also poses a significant threat to the territorial integrity and thus to the very statehood of small island states. In their view, in the event of the complete loss of a state's territory and the displacement of its population, a strong presumption in favor of continued statehood should apply. In the view of the court, once a state is established, the disappearance of one of its constituent elements would not necessarily entail the loss of its statehood. Through this opinion, the court participates in the activities of the United Nations and the international community represented in that body with the hope that its conclusions will allow the law to inform and guide social and political action to address the ongoing climate crisis.